So I haven't uploaded a video for a few weeks, and for that I do apologise. It's been incredibly busy here in the workshop. On top of that, I've also had problems with my microphone, and so I've managed to resolve that problem by getting a new one. So today I'm going to be stripping this beautiful IWC FA Jones movement. It's a really lovely watch, and this came in as a dead stopper, as it happens, and it actually turned out to be the hack which stops the balance when you pull the winder out. Had managed to get itself jammed on top of the balance rim. No idea how that must have happened. Didn't look like the watch had been banged or anything. But yeah, that's what happened. And so I released the hack from the balance wheel and the watch started going fine. But it wasn't a brilliant reading on the timing machine. And on closer inspection, it turns out that the lubrication was fairly dry. And so it's really going to benefit from a full strip down and a clean and a service. So that's what we're going to do. So right now I'm just removing the movement from the watch case, and I've loosened the bolt screw, and I'm about to take out the winder so that I can remove the movement. So with the movement out of the case, what I do is put the winder back into the movement. This will aid letting down the power a bit later on. So now I'm going to take the dial and hands off. As you can see, I'm using a plastic Sealy bag in order to protect the dial whilst lifting the hands. And the dial is secured with 2 dial screws around the edge of the movement. So I'm removing the hour wheel and now the cannon pinion. So now I need to remove any residual power that's left in the mainspring. So this is done by holding the click spring whilst gently allowing the winder to rub through my fingers. I don't like the mainspring to just snap down. So now with the power removed from the watch, I can remove the escapement, and I'll start with the balance wheel. And before I remove the pallets, just to make 100% sure that all the power is removed from the watch, I'm going to take off the ratchet wheel. In this case, the ratchet wheel is secured with these 3 screws, which is a fairly unusual setup. Quite often it's just a single screw in the middle of the ratchet wheel. You can see it's got like a secondary wheel underneath it. So whilst I'm here, I can as well remove the crown wheel, which is, again, it's got secured with 3 screws. And quite often these crown wheels are secured with a left-handed thread screw, or a reverse threaded screw. Now we have this like secondary, I don't know what to call this, to be honest with you. It's like a secondary ratchet wheel, if you like. Maybe somebody will correct me on that. So now I'm absolutely certain that all the power is out of the watch. I can proceed now to remove the pallets. You can notice I'm using some pegwood to hold the pallet cock down whilst removing the screws. This is because sometimes the pallet cock gets a bit loose, could jump out whilst you're unscrewing, and with the pressure of the screwdriver that could potentially damage the pallet pivot, or the pivots on the pallet. So it's always useful to just use some pegwood to hold it down whilst you're unscrewing. So now I'm going to remove the main plate, which in this case is secured with 3 screws. And this reveals the train of wheels and the barrel. Let's start by removing the center wheel. There we have the 3rd wheel. And the 4th wheel. This 4th wheel has an extended pivot which holds the off-center seconds. And of course the escape wheel. And we'll just take out the barrel. Now here's the balance hack. It operates when you pull out the winder. As you can see, any tension on the hack is released and it will touch the balance rim, obviously stopping it. So let's remove the rest of the motion work. And quite often the setting lever spring will cover the whole lot, but this is slightly different. So we have this cover plate here, which is holding the minute wheel, and these 2 intermediate wheels. And so in place of a setting lever spring, we have these 2 springs here. And in place of the setting lever spring and a yoke. And so we're going to take off this spring which is acting as the yoke. That is held by 2 screws here. And sometimes these ping off if they're under tension, so again I use pegwood just to hold it in place whilst I'm unscrewing. As it turns out, there was no tension on it, but I was just being careful. These screws are actually really quite tight. So I'm being very careful not to damage the screw heads. Okay, now, so I'd like to take off the setting lever. And of course I'll have to unscrew the setting lever screw for that. And the setting lever just fell to the bench, as it would do. Now I can take out the stem. And the winding pinion. And the clutch wheel. And with that, we can see that the watch is disassembled. And ready for the cleaning machine. So now the watch has been cleaned through the cleaning machine. If anybody's wondering, I do have another video which shows how to use the cleaning machine. But in this case, now we're going to start to reassemble. Now, here we have the balance hack, which I removed earlier. However, I didn't show that on the video, and for that I do apologise. But it was secured with this one screw. And in this case it was simply replacing the hack into this slot. So now I'm going to replace the train of wheels. And as I always do, I've started here with the escape wheel, now the 4th wheel. If you remember, the 4th wheel has an extended pivot for the off-center seconds hand. Now we have the 3rd wheel. Now I've cleaned and lubricated the mainspring inside the barrel, I have plenty of videos where I've actually shown this. In this case I haven't. So the center wheel goes back in place as well now. Now before replacing the main plate, let's not forget to position the setting lever screw. Now with the main plate in position, we can make sure that all the pivots for the wheels are located in the respective holes before screwing down the main plate. Now, sometimes this can be a tricky job. Patience will get you through the day in this case. There we go. Just checking the free running of the train. And whilst I'm still holding the main plate with the pegwood so that it doesn't jump out of position, I'm going to tack it down with one screw here. I'm not going to over tighten this screw because first of all I'd like to make sure that the train is still free. Now I'm absolutely certain, now I can actually tighten the screw. And so now I'm going to oil the barrel arbor bearing, and I'm using D5 here. And with that oiled, I can continue to reassemble. And here I'm fitting this extra sort of ratchet wheel shim, if you like. The actual ratchet wheel screws onto this with the 3 screws as mentioned earlier. But first of all, let's just oil the rest of the jewel holes, and the center wheel I'm using D5. And I'll be using 90-10 for the third wheel, the fourth wheel and the escape wheel. And so now I'm reinstalling the ratchet click. And naturally there's a spring for the ratchet click. Yes, and I'm lubricating the ratchet click with a little bit of grease. You may notice I'm using brass tweezers for most of the reassembly, specifically when picking up large objects. And one of the reasons for this is this particular watch has a display back, and of course it would be undesirable to leave scratches all over the plates. And so there's less risk of that when using brass tweezers. So here I just need to line up the holes of the ratchet wheel so that I can screw that into place. Great, and with that done, now the next job is to reassemble the keyless work. And I'll start by lubricating the clutch wheel and the winding pinion. And now the stem can go back into place. And now I'm going to refit the setting lever. So we have the two springs that we referenced earlier. One is acting as a yoke or return bar, and the other one is acting as the setting lever spring. It's a fairly unusual setup. So I'm just replacing those now. My Rodico. Okay, and so the operation seems smooth enough. Let's give it a quick test here. Yep, the hack is moving nicely. Okay, so now I need to refit the cannon pinion. And so first of all I'll grease the center wheel pivot. But obviously before I fit the cannon pinion, I first need to oil the bearing there. So again, I'm using D5 here. And whilst I'm at it, I'll oil the rest of the train. I'll start with the barrel arbor bearing. And we'll do the third wheel and the fourth wheel and the escape wheel. Just the same as we did before. One thing I will note is that the escape wheel has a cap jewel on this particular watch, and I hadn't filmed it, but I used an automatic oiler to oil the cap jewel. So with that done, I'm just driving home the cannon pinion. So now those are oiled, I can refit the rest of the motion work. And we have a little cover plate that keeps everything secure. Again, checking the free running, making sure nothing is snagging. So all the train wheels are nicely lubricated. We've fitted the keyless work and the motion work. So now moving on finally to the escapement, and we'll start with the pallets. As always, holding the pallet cock secure with pegwood whilst I'm screwing down, So they have a tendency to jump out of position otherwise, and that can potentially damage the pivots on the pallets. So with the pallets in place, I'm now refitting the balance. And with the balance fitted, have to lubricate the end stones or the Incablock shock system. So I'll start by releasing the shock spring. These Incablock shock springs are hinged. And so it comes out with one as a unit. Usually the end stone is friction tight inside the setting. So here's the end stone outside of the setting. I'm just going to apply some 9010. And then 9010 should cover some 2/3 of the end stone. So with the end stone back in its setting, I'll just replace that and we'll do the other side. So finally, we get to refit the dial and the hands. Now you may remember when removing the dial earlier, there are 2 dial screws situated around the edge of the movement. Dial screws are usually opposite each other. On some watches there are 3 dial screws, although that is more rare. Now the dial is refitted, I can refit the hands. First of all, the off-center or sub-dial. And you remember this goes onto the 4th wheel pivot, which is extended. Just a little side note there. And with the minute hand on, all we have left to do is recase this movement, but before I do that I like to give it a good test outside of the case and to regulate it or calibrate it. So I'm sure you'll agree it's a beautiful looking movement on these FA Jones IWC watches. I thoroughly enjoyed working on this one. So as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.